In 2012, Carly Zakin and Danielle Weisberg founded The Skim from their couch. Now, 6 years later, their morning newsletter gives over 7 million subscribers the news and information they need to start their day. And when they first started the company, they got a lot of advice from other female entrepreneurs. And now they're sharing those conversations and more on their podcast, Skimmed from the Couch, SKIMM' from the couch. Every week, you'll hear from women like Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post and Thrive, on why she puts her phone to bed at night, or Melanie Whalen, CEO of SoulCycle, on why she has a millennial mentor, or how actor Taraji P. Henson got over her first rejection and learned how to negotiate for herself. It's a podcast about the real stuff, tips and tricks to launch, grow, or change your career. The only rule on the couch, no BS. And check out Skimmed from the Couch wherever you listen to your podcasts.
9.
T-minus 8 seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff.
Hello and welcome back to the Space News Podcast. My name is Will, and I'm beaming this directly to you from the mothership. I want to say thank you to everybody who supported the podcast throughout the time that we've been doing this. And I want to say that the easiest way to support the podcast is just by listening to it. But there are other ways as well. You can go to our website, spacenewspodcast.com, to A, listen to all the episodes, and B, you can check us out on social, on Twitter and Facebook for the time being. And we also have a Discord that you can check out as well. And I'm working on some other cool stuff like a Patreon, and I'm also working on a little Kickstarter campaign, which is going to be in the future. So you don't have to worry about that quite yet. So thank you to everybody who's supported this podcast. You are amazing. You want to know what else is amazing? That in 1924, which is less than 100 years ago, Edwin Hubble announced that other galaxies outside of the Milky Way exist. Other galaxies. It's a normal thing. You can look up in the sky with a nice, like a cheap telescope, and you can see another galaxy. You can see a little blob that's a galaxy. They used to think these things were nebulae, and they were clouds of dust and gas and things like that. But Hubble figured it out, and he found out that, hey, these aren't just things up there. These aren't just piles of gas and rubble and things like that. These are other galaxies. It isn't just dust. These things have planets. They have other suns. They have other stars. They have other moons. Well, he didn't know about the moons, but he knew that they were galaxies, and he announced it in 1924, less than 100 years ago. This discovery made him regarded as one of the most important astronomers of all time. And you might know his name from the Hubble Space Telescope, which is very important. It's a very important piece of equipment that's floating around in space right now. It's actually taking photos of galaxies. And Hubble also provided evidence that the recessional velocity of a galaxy increases with its distance from the Earth, which is a property known as Hubble's law, despite the fact that it had been both proposed and demonstrated observationally 2 years earlier. Now, Hubble's law implies that the universe is actually expanding. Oh, by the way, Happy New Year's Eve, everybody. It's New Year's Eve right now, and I'm recording this at about 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So in about 8 hours, it'll be tomorrow, and it'll be a new year on the East Coast. So Happy New Year, everybody. So in 1919, Hubble made it to the Mount Wilson Observatory in California. And it's around that time that there was a 100-inch telescope. It's called the Hooker telescope, which is the world's largest at that time. And he started using this thing to check out the night sky. During his time there, Hubble identified these things are called the standard candle, right? These are stars, basically. And it's just a normal star. And he found them in spiral nebulae, which is including the Andromeda Nebula and the Triangulum. And He made these in 1922 and 1923, which proved conclusively that these nebulae were much too distant to be part of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, and that they were actually, in fact, entire galaxies on their own. Now, Hubble was kind of an outsider here. There were people that were against him. It was opposed by many in the astronomy establishment, and in particular by Harvard University-based Harlow Shapley. You know what, Harlow Shapley? Joke's on you, buddy, because Hubble's right, and Hubble is a legend now. So, Harlow, I'm sorry, buddy. It was not the right call. People make mistakes. It's all good. But Hubble is a legend now, so that's pretty awesome. Now, despite all this opposition, Hubble, who was 35 at this time, published his findings in the New York Times and then presented them to other astronomers on January 1st of 1925. A meeting of the American Astronomical Society. Man, my voice and my words are mixed up right now. And Hubble's results for Andromeda were not formally published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal until 1929. Now, this is a big deal. This is a huge, huge deal as far as studies of the universe goes. It's used throughout history from that time until now to discover so many amazing things, because we would never know about exoplanets if we didn't know about Hubble's discovery of other galaxies. And then there's the redshift. It increases with distance. And in 1929, Hubble examined the relation between distance and redshift of galaxies, and combining his measurements of galaxy distances with measurements of redshifts of the galaxies with his assistant, Milton Humason, he found a rough linear relation between the distances of galaxies and their redshift, a discovery that later became known as Hubble's law. And we all know who Albert Einstein is, right? Okay, so I hope you do. And if you don't know who Albert Einstein is, he's basically the godfather of all this stuff. E equals mc squared. Physics, etc., etc. Look that guy up if you don't know anything about him. Wikipedia has amazing articles on the guy. So Albert Einstein had this thing that he refers to as his biggest blunder of his life. It's the cosmological constant, which is a fudge factor to his equations to avoid the problem of the redshift. And when he heard about Hubble's redshifts, he immediately realized that the expansion predicted by general relativity must be real. And this is when Einstein also visited Hubble and tried to convince him that the universe was expanding. Hubble also discovered the asteroid 1373 Cincinnati on April 30th of 1935. So he wasn't just finding galaxies. He wasn't just that guy. He also discovered an asteroid. And in 1936, he wrote The Observational Approach to Cosmology in the Realm of the Nebulae, which explained his approaches to extragalactic astronomy and his view of the subject's history. And Hubble did all these amazing things. But when you do amazing things in physics, what do? What do you get? What do you get for your troubles? What do you get for all of this hard work that you've done for your whole life? You usually get a Nobel Prize if it's something of this magnitude. This is huge. Everything Hubble did, finding the other galaxies, redshift, all that, it is a huge deal. So he should have gotten a Nobel Prize, but he never did, because the Nobel Prize back in that time was only for physics. There wasn't astrophysics, so Hubble never got a Nobel Prize. But let's think about this. How cool is this? On March 6, 2008, the United States Postal Service released a 41-cent stamp honoring Hubble on a sheet titled American Scientists, designed by artist Victor Staben. So he didn't really get the credibility that he deserves as far as the Nobel Prize goes, but he's one of the most important people in the history of humanity, in the history of science. But he got a stamp. That's pretty cool. And you know what else is cool? you are. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Everybody that's listened to this podcast, thank you for the support. The best way to support this podcast is to A, listen to the podcast, B, go to spacenewspodcast.com and check out all of our social media channels at Space News Pod on Facebook and Twitter. And also there's a Discord link at our spacenewspodcast.com website. There's going to be a Patreon. There's going to be a Kickstarter too, I think. I'm thinking about that. But that's all because of you. Thank you so much. My name is Will, and I will see you soon.
4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff.